The original lectures that we now call the agricultural lectures were originally titled The Spiritual Renewal of Agriculture. So they're basically, it's a methodology to reconnect farmers with their land and the functions, you know, in the landscape. I'm Shane Joyce. I've been raising beef cattle in central Queensland since 1982. I started into biodynamic farming in 2002 and been working with Biodynamics ever since. Biodynamics comes from Rudolf Steiner, who delivered a series of lectures to a group of farmers in Europe in 1924, and he left these people with a series of remedies based on minerals, cow manure, and half a dozen herbs. All these preparations were designed to use separately and at particular times of the planetary cycles and time of day. So let's go into Biodynamics, Rudolf Steiner's Biodynamics from 1924, and we're now in 2016, and the evolution of biodynamics to fit with the Australian landscape and to fit with Australian farmers in broad acre situations. What we're going to make in this process is what I now call Australian Soil Activator. So it's a combination of all of the biodynamic preparations, about 8 different preparations, into one product that can be applied to farms or gardens any time of the year at any cycles of the planets. This methodology was developed to simplify the process. The original process with biodynamics was to apply all these preparations individually and at specific times according to planetary cycles and the season. My experience working in that way is it didn't work for most farmers because of the timing and because they had to do so many different operations. So they already had enough work, they were busy enough. They didn't need to be doing all these things several times. Myself, I was putting out one preparation in the afternoon and then spraying the same area the next morning. I got over that very quickly. So the preparation this is it here, which basically it ends up a little like a Play-Doh or plasticine, very pliable and soft. I'm using this at a rate of 75 grams per hectare, mixed in 35 litres of water. So the origin of biodynamics, I guess, was after World War I. A lot of the chemicals that were used for explosives in the war were redeployed into use in agriculture as fertilisers. The farmers that asked Steiner to come and talk to them, they noticed a change in the health of their land as well as the health of their animals and crops. And so they were looking for some way to remedy this. So that's basically the origin of the biodynamic preparations and what Rudolf Steiner did with them. So to make this soil activator, the main ingredient is fresh cow manure, collected from the paddock or from the dairy, or preferably not from a feedlot because it'll have grain in it. So fresh cow manure, I generally use around about 1 wheelbarrow load. This time we'll be mixing, I think it's going to be half a wheelbarrow, so it'll be a half mix. Fresh cow manure, finely ground rock dust. In most of the biodynamic work you'll come across, they'll tell you to use basalt dust. I've used any sort of rock dust, so I'll source the rock dust off farm within the farm if I can. So rather than importing something from outside, I'll use what I've got on the farm. The third ingredient is finely ground eggshells. These are ideally not fine enough. I'd like to get them down finer, but we didn't have the machinery here to do this today. The next one is a casuarina ferment. This has evolved from equisetum, which was in Steiner's work. In Australia we can't have equisetum, it's a declared weed. So if we want to use equisetum, we have to import dried equisetum from New Zealand. The casuarina tree, which is common over all of our landscapes, will do exactly the same thing. So I'll take the leaf off the casuarina tree and ferment it for about 3 months in a barrel of water, and I'll use that liquid in this mixture. The next ingredient is summer horn clay and horn silica. In the work of Steiner, and since Steiner, the horn silica has been made separately, buried over the summer in a cow horn. I've taken this another step, and I now mix my silica with clay and bury it as a mix. The next ingredient is horn manure, also with clay in it. So it's a winter horn clay and a horn manure. This is made from fresh cow manure put into a horn and buried over the winter. I mix the clay with the cow manure at 10%. So there's nine parts of cow manure and 1 part of clay. The reason for combining the clay and silica and the manure and the silica is my experience was we were making these products, the horn clay products, and we weren't using them. Traditionally we were putting silica in the horn and then putting a cap of clay over the top of it. We were putting manure in the horn and putting a cap of clay on top. I ended up with barrels full of clay. I was selling the silica and selling the horn manure, but nobody was using the clay. I saw it as an essential part of biodynamics that we have the clay in there, so I then started combining the two things together when I made them, and it made the clay compulsory to use. You couldn't get away from it. The original lectures that we now call the agricultural lectures were originally titled The Spiritual Renewal of Agriculture. So they're basically, it's a methodology to reconnect farmers with their land and the functions, you know, in the landscape. And I guess in terms of principles, for me, probably the the overriding principle in biodynamics for me was it was extremely complicated, and I found that when I worked with other farmers, it kind of was impossible for them to do this. So that has been my journey since 2002 to simplify the process and make it more accessible to farmers who are, you know, one guy in particular that I've worked with over the years is dyslexic, so doesn't read anything. So it was no good giving him a book. It was no good giving him too much information because he couldn't digest it. So I started to, with him, simplify the process, and he doesn't even know what the word biodynamic means. And he's been using the biodynamic preparation since 2007 and continues to use them on his farm. And during that journey, he's stopped using any chemicals that he was using and getting much better production. Okay, we'll go through the mixing process now, starting with the cow manure. Then the rock dust, eggshells, the casuarina ferment, the horn silica, horn clay, the summer preparation. That's as it'll come out of the horn. The winter preparation, horn manure, and again horn clay. Now the shovel. So we'll mix this all together for about a half an hour of mixing. We'll also need to add water to this to get the right consistency. This is not anywhere near wet enough yet. So we'll need to add water on the top. Yeah, that's good. Where I saw the changes happening was when I started working with other farmers and going into landscapes that hadn't had the kind of 20 years of nurturing that mine had had. And the methodology I used was I went to these farmers and set about to apply biodynamic preparations 3 times a month apart. And the first time I sprayed, I would take soil samples and just put these in a zip sandwich bag and write a date and where they'd come from. So then the next time I came and sprayed, I'd do the same process, take soil samples again, store them, and then I could compare one with the other. And the Lucent farm, the dyslexic guy, the first soil samples I took there, the soil was almost like rock. A month later I took samples, it was still pretty much like rock, but the soil had started to change colour. When I got back, the third spraying on that farm was not 3 months, it was 5.5 months. The soil was already beautifully soft and dark and very friable. So yeah, that was, the changes were dramatic in that farm. The changes in his production were also dramatic. Probably a little more water. Yeah, we'll try that. So the horn manure, which is a winter preparation that we put in here, the horn manure and the winter horn manure and winter horn clay, it buries in the autumn and stays in the ground over winter. And I generally dig it up again at the beginning of spring. What is happening in that time is all the energy from the cosmos is all being breathed into the earth. So we get a concentration, and the horn actually works as an amplifier. So the horn is just like a seashell. If you put it to your ear, you'll get a sound. So this is an amplifier for the cosmic energies coming in that works on the clay and the manure in the horn. That product then, when you put it on the land, it works downwards into the soil. So it works the same as gravity, it works downwards, and it'll break up hard pans in a farm. The opposite of that is the horn silica, which again I've mixed with clay. So it's a summer preparation. We bury in the spring and dig up at the end of summer or beginning of autumn. This preparation works the opposite, it works upwards. So rather than working in gravity, this preparation works in levity, which is up. The role of the clay in these two preparations, we've got a downwards force and an upwards force. The role of the clay in these preparations is to connect them together. If you think of what clay's like to handle, it sticks to everything. Clay holds onto fertility. So if you put the two forces that are working in opposite directions there on their own, they will just separate. There's nothing to hold them together. If we've got the clay in there, it holds it together. If you've got a sandy soil, it has very little ability to hold nutrient or water. So a sand which is high silica can't hold the fertility. You need to have clay with it to hold the fertility. If you use the horn manure, the downward force on its own, you'll get leaching of nutrients. Your nutrients will all leave your farm and end up in the water table. I think we might add a little more water. Yeah, that'll be good. When I first came across biodynamics in 1974, it was mostly used by small operations, small crop growers, gardeners, and not so much used in broad acre. When I came to Biodynamics then in 2002, it was also a very similar picture, and the application methods when you're related to broad acre were very difficult. What I was taught was with the horn manure, the soil preparation, you put it out after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. When you start to try and cover, 5,000 hectares or 10,000 hectares and do it after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you don't get much covered. With the horn silica, it was to be applied in the morning. And similarly, what you'd sprayed the horn manure onto the previous afternoon, you had to come back and cover the same area the next morning. So in terms of getting it done in a vegetable garden, it was easy. In terms of getting it done on 5,000 or 10,000 hectares, it became impossible. I then started looking at this, and we had around 8 different biodynamic preparations, and largely they were to be applied separately. So the time involved in getting them out there and trying to fit them in with these fairly rigid time frames made it impossible. I then began to combine the preparations, and this came after reading a a book called Sanctuary by a guy called Stephen Lewis, who was a homeopath, and he shifted his operation in treating people homeopathically to broadcasting all his remedies 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, whereas when he began he was doing the remedies one at a time and for particular time. He found that the 24/7 broadcast of his remedies worked, and I said, after reading this, I said to myself, I can apply this same technology to my landscape. So I've combined all the biodynamic preparations into what I call a soil activator, and yeah, put it out any time between the 1st of January and the 31st of December. So I think that's pretty good like that. All right, so this is the pit that we make the soil activator in. This is a previous batch that is now ready to come out. This has been here for, experience shows me that this process takes 2 to 4 months. So generally about 4 months. So this one has been in here, I think, since May. So May, June, July, August. This has come up to about, it's 4 months. You'll see in the bottom here, plant roots coming in. Plant roots will come in from everywhere to seek this stuff out. So you've got to be very careful where you put the pit. If you put it close to pawpaws, bananas, pumpkins, they'll be in there and invade the pit and take a lot of the goodness out of it. So you need to locate the pit somewhere where it hasn't got too many trees that'll invade it. And if you've got a problem with trees, you can put a barrier around it to stop them. I do these pits in the vegetable garden because I see this process as no different to growing a lettuce or a cabbage. It's another gardening procedure. If you do it in your garden, you're tending your plants, you keep the soil moisture right, so the whole process depends a lot on moisture. If you haven't got moisture, biological processes just come to a halt. This pit is the second time we've made soil activator in it. We first did this pit back in October last year. That's the bottom of the pit. So it is 1, 2, 3, 4 bricks. And it's built half in the ground and half out, so you don't have to dig a deep hole. You dig a shallow hole, and the dirt that comes out of the hole then goes around the top bricks. So you actually got half in the ground, so you're 2.5 bricks in the ground and 2.5 bricks out. You can build these with wood or concrete blocks, anything. I build out of bricks because I had bricks to work with. Now we go in with this goes into the pit. Get these guys out of the road. This for me is a half-size pit. I normally build a pit twice this size. The dimensions of my pit normally are that size. So you can see with this one, I'm probably only maybe even a third of that. And the dimensions for that are determined by the size of the sack. It's not anything scientific. This pit's small because it's just been set up as a garden thing. The full-size pit like that, one full wheelbarrow load, is enough product to do something like 1,000 acres. Okay, so now we're in the pit. The next part of the process is to put the compost preparations in. The water we will use, so what I'm putting into the water is a valerian flower ferment, and that's one of the ones, I don't use valerian, I use an Australian plant to do that with. This needs to be stirred for 10 minutes, so take it around in one direction until you get a vortex, and then take it back in the other direction until you get a vortex, and then just keep that for 10 minutes. So these are the other 5 compost preparations. Some parts of Biodynamics, they'll give you an order to these in a pattern. I've never taken any notice of the pattern. It's just, there's one that's made from stinging nettle. The stinging nettle's buried in a clay pipe in the ground for 12 months. One's made from chamomile flowers that are put in the small intestine of a cow and buried over the winter. One's made from dandelion flowers, which is wrapped in the mesentery of the cow, the membrane that goes around the cow's stomach. It's wrapped in that and buried over the winter for 6 months. One's made of oak bark from the English oak tree. I use one of the Australian trees to do that. And the bark you grind up finely and put it in a skull of a cow and put it in a swamp for 6 months over winter. And the other one's made from yarrow flowers that goes in the bladder of a deer, or for me it's a kangaroo. You hang it in a tree over the summer and then bury it for the winter. And I just put these in a pattern of 5. So when you put these in, it's like you're creating a living being. So each of these represents different body organs like heart, lungs, liver, spleen, kidneys. So you're creating a live composting process. Just close them over, and then I'll go again and put some of this liquid in. And then we wet the bag in this. And go on top. Piece of roofing iron and a rock or 2. So with those compost preparations, 4 of them I've replaced with plants off my farm. 2 of them I haven't. The 2 that I haven't replaced, one's stinging nettle because that grows here anyhow. And the other one that I haven't replaced is this guy's yarrow. And yarrow grows anywhere for us. The other ones I had difficulty growing them. The remainder of this liquid just gets sprinkled out around the pit. And my picture of what this does is this actually creates a protective dome over the whole pit. Done. End. And that's, you have to round these things off, don't you? This is the one I prepared earlier. This is a soil activator that we started the thing with.
And then you dilute that in water? You put
Yeah, this goes, I put 75 grams of this to 35 litres of water, and that'll cover a hectare, so 100 metres by 100 metres. And my general test for this to see if it's done is what I call the smear test of doing that and see the way it just smears out, spreads. I guess the important thing with biodynamics that I've found is just doing it. It's no good going home, when you learn about biodynamics, it's no good going home and running an experiment. The biodynamic preparation has been used since 1924, so there's no need to go and prove that they work. If you set out to do an experiment and say, I'll treat this paddock and I won't treat that paddock and compare them, it really is an indication that you don't trust that it'll work. So you're setting up to prove that it won't work in a way. So I guess my recommendation is that yeah, you just get the information and just go and do it. Get the preparations onto the land and the land will tell you what's happening. And don't mess around with experimenting. Just treat the whole place and go for it.